They mocked me in the private chat I created. Jokes, nicknames, petty comments about my experience, decisions, and age. They thought I'd never find out, but they forgot one thing. I was still the admin. My name is Dave Marlin. I'm 44 years old and I led the engineering team at a mid-sized software company. And when they decided they could run without me, I let them prove it, the hard way. It was a quiet Wednesday evening at the office when a strange message blinked onto my screen. I had been working late, as I often did, finalizing some code documentation, while the rest of the building was dark and empty. The notification was from our team's group chat, a lively channel that usually discussed project updates and the occasional off-topic banter. But this message was different. In the stillness of my cubicle, the words on the screen sent a chill through me. Dave is clueless. He still thinks we actually need his sign-off. The words hung there for a second, casual and cutting, before disappearing. The sender, one of my junior developers named Mark, deleted the message almost as soon as it was sent, but it was too late. I'd seen it, every word. For a long moment I just sat there, hand frozen on my mouse, staring at the now empty chat, heart thudding in the quiet. I blinked and leaned closer to the monitor, as if the faint ghost of those words might still be visible. But nothing remained except the innocuous message deleted notification that Mark's frantic retraction had left behind. The office air conditioner hummed softly as I replayed what I'd seen in my head. Clueless. We don't need his sign-off. My stomach nodded. Mark had always been friendly to my face, respectful, even eager, whenever we brainstormed solutions together. I felt a heat rising in my cheeks, not just embarrassment, but the sting of betrayal, and yet I forced myself to breathe slowly. Years of managing teams had taught me one valuable lesson: never react in anger. Stay calm, gather information, and then decide on a course. I took a sip of cold coffee and steadied my hands on the desk. If Mark posted that in the group chat by accident, it meant it wasn't meant for me to see at all. It likely belonged in some other conversation, perhaps a private chat among the younger team members. The thought made my chest tight. I'd always encouraged camaraderie on our team, even set up the official group chat myself when I became team lead 2 years ago. The idea that they might have formed a separate conversation just to mock me was painful. Still, I needed to be sure. A single deleted message, hurtful as it was, wasn't the full story. Maybe it was a one-time lapse in judgment, a stupid joke that landed in the wrong window. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. After all, hadn't we just last week celebrated a successful project launch together, laughing and clinking coffee mugs in the break room? Mark had even patted me on the back, saying, "Great leadership, Dave," with a grin. I exhaled slowly and made a decision. I wouldn't confront Mark or anyone else, not yet. Instead, I would find out what that message was about, quietly and thoroughly. As the admin of our company's chat system, I had more access than they realized. I had set up the entire platform's backend myself. Oversight of communications was technically part of my responsibility, though I'd never before felt the need to use that power for anything beyond troubleshooting. Tonight, though, I felt an uneasy urgency pushing me forward. The silence of the office felt heavier now. With a few measured clicks, I accessed the administrative console. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I navigated to the message logs. I could retrieve the recently deleted message if I wanted. It would be archived on the server. But I already knew what it said. What I needed was context. A single message was the spark. Now I needed to find the fire. And if there was indeed a secret group chat where my team spoke about me behind my back, I was determined to read every word. Within minutes, I found it. A private channel buried in the admin panel's logs. It had an innocuous name, something like Project Brainstorm, which almost made me laugh at the irony. There it was. A group chat containing all my direct reports, minus me. My heart sank as I realized how long it had likely been active. The history was long, stretching back for months. With a deep breath, I began to scroll through the archived messages. Immediately, the casual friendliness I knew in the office gave way to a very different tone in writing. The earliest messages were relatively tame, small gripes about deadlines, a joke or two about my meticulous planning, but as I read on, the candor sharpened into cruelty. It was like peeling back a smiling mask to find a sneer underneath. I saw my name, or rather variations of it, scattered across the conversation. Old Dave, Captain Sign-Off, even the Fossil. Each nickname felt like a small cut, precise and mean. Still, I kept reading, compelled by a mix of morbid curiosity and heartbreak. Message after message, the thread unfolded a story I hadn't realized I was a character in. One night, shortly after I'd led a training session on a new software tool, Jasmine, one of our brightest UX designers, had written, "Did you see how confused he looked explaining the API integration? I ended up clarifying it to the interns afterward." Leo, a back-end developer, replied, "Classic. He's in over his head with this new tech." I paused, remembering that session. I hadn't been confused at all. I was pausing to let the junior people answer questions, a teaching technique to ensure they were following. Apparently, my silence had been misread as ignorance. The chat log continued. Mark chimed in. "At least he's not micromanaging every comment. I slip a lot past him, huh?" A grinning emoji followed. So that was how they saw my trust. Not as mentorship, but as incompetence. The knot in my stomach tightened. As I delved further into the thread, the gloves truly came off. I found a conversation from a few weeks ago, late at night, when a production bug had delayed our deployment. I remembered staying up with the team on a video call until we patched it, praising everyone for the hard work. In the chat, however, the story was different. "We would have solved it an hour sooner if Dave hadn't been insisting on his approach first," Tasha wrote, referring to the debugging steps I'd suggested. Jasmine responded with a gif of an old man falling asleep and a line, "Dave during the call, LOL." A flurry of laughing reactions from the others ensued. My cheeks burned as I recalled that night. I was tired, yes, but I was coordinating the fix, not dozing off. Still, to them I was a joke. The messages became a dossier of every perceived flaw. My cautious decision-making was paranoia. My experience in older systems made me outdated, and my thorough review of their code was playing gatekeeper. Each word was blunt, unfettered by any respect, because they never expected me to read them. Worst of all were the messages that hinted at a plan, or at least a hope, that I would soon be out of the picture. "Once this project is done, we should talk to Anton about putting someone younger in charge," Leo had written to the others, presumably referring to our department director. Mark agreed. "Yeah, we need fresh ideas, not a 50-year-old bottleneck." Fresh ideas. Bottleneck. The casual discussion of ousting me from the role I'd poured my soul into felt like a punch to the gut. I realized with a jolt that this wasn't just venting. They truly believed the team would be better off without me. The person I thought I was, a supportive leader and mentor, was, in their eyes, a hindrance. I had to set the laptop aside for a moment as a wave of nausea and anger rolled through me. It took a few slow breaths before I could continue. I skimmed further, bracing myself. They even joked how smoothly things ran when I took a vacation last month, suggesting I should take more time off. As recently as yesterday, Mark griped that my insistence on a final review meeting was a waste of time, and Leo quipped they'd do the real work after I left. I felt a tight, bitter smile form despite the ache in my chest. They truly saw me as the obstacle, blind to how I often stayed late to catch issues they missed. The irony was almost laughable. By the time I reached the message Mark mistakenly sent to the wrong chat, the one I saw, I had a comprehensive picture of their little world. In that context, his deleted line was just one more sarcastic barb in an endless chain. I sat there in the empty office, the glow of the screen illuminating a catalog of ridicule penned in secret. I felt a curious calm wash over me as the initial shock and hurt hardened into resolve. They had no idea that their entire thread was now saved to a secure folder on my desktop, copied and time-stamped. It was nearly midnight. My eyes ached from reading, and my heart felt bruised, but I also sensed something solidify inside, a quiet, steely determination. If my team truly believed I was nothing but a useless overseer, then it was time to show them what happens when the old bottleneck quietly steps aside, or perhaps more fittingly, when he quietly takes the wheel. I closed the chat log and shut my laptop. The first light of dawn was peeking through the office window. There would be no confrontation in the morning, no hint that I knew anything at all. I would go in as I always did, calm and focused. They wanted to work without me? Fine. Soon enough, they were going to get exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing at all had happened. I greeted each of them with a cordial nod and a slight smile, coffee in hand, playing my part in the familiar routine. Inside, every glance and stray smirk I caught between them felt different now. Was that a flicker of guilt I saw on Mark's face when I said good morning? Did Jasmine's "Hi, Dave" sound a touch forced? Perhaps it was my imagination. If they were worried about last night's slip-up, they hid it well enough. In our daily stand-up meeting, I ran through the agenda calmly. My voice didn't betray a thing. Project Alpha's final milestone was just 2 days away, and I could sense the team's usual mix of stress and excitement. They thought they were on track to deliver it without my heavy involvement. After all, I'd been intentionally hands-off lately, letting them handle more on their own. That morning I even found myself delegating with an ease that visibly surprised them. "Mark," I said, "why don't you lead the client demo on Friday? You've been deep in this feature. You know it best." He blinked, then nodded slowly, a mixture of pride and apprehension in his eyes. I saw Jasmine shoot Leo a quick look. Was that excitement? I pretended not to notice. This newfound freedom seemed to lift their spirits. I caught snatches of their hallway. Conversations later, voices hushed but upbeat. "Finally presenting without a babysitter," I heard Leo joke quietly to Mark by the water cooler, not realizing I was just around the corner. I only paused for a moment, letting their words hang in the air as I moved on with a faint smile. They had no idea that I was deliberately stepping back, laying the ground for what was to come. Over the course of that day, I made a series of quiet adjustments. As team lead and system administrator, I had the authority to manage access permissions for our project tools. And so I did. I didn't revoke anything critical just yet. That would be too obvious, too soon. Instead, I primed the system for a swift lockout when the time was right. A subtle change in our continuous integration settings here, a scheduled update to user roles there. Nothing that would trigger an immediate alarm, but enough to ensure that when the final build was ready to push live, only one account would have the credentials to do so. Mine. Each change I made was logged under routine maintenance. If anyone happened to review the audit trails, they'd see nothing amiss, just the usual security updates from the ever-cautious Dave. In parallel, I took steps to ensure I wouldn't be seen as the saboteur if things went south. That afternoon, I dropped by Anton's office. He was our department director, a perceptive man who trusted my judgment. In a casual tone, I mentioned that I was giving the team more autonomy on Project Alpha's conclusion. "They're a talented bunch," I said, managing a sincere smile. "I think it'll be a good growth opportunity for them if I step back and let them handle the final presentation and deployment. I'll be there if needed, of course, but only as a safety net." Anton raised an eyebrow. "That's a big step," he remarked. I chuckled. "They've earned the chance to show what they can do." He nodded, buying in. By framing it as a mentorship move, I ensured that our boss would be primed to view the outcome as the team's own doing, for better or worse. Walking out of Anton's office, I felt calm and resolved. The pieces were almost in place. Late that evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the dim glow of my monitor, reviewing my plan. The office was quiet enough that I could hear the tick of the analog clock on the wall. In the silence, I double-checked the configurations I'd set. The deployment scripts were adjusted so that any attempt to release the build would prompt for elevated credentials. Credentials none of them had anymore. The shared drive with the presentation assets was now accessible only through my account after 8 p.m., a little scheduling trick that would lock them out if they tried to make last-minute changes overnight. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. A part of me was still saddened that it had come to this, that trust had eroded into quiet subterfuge. But then I recalled those chat messages. "We don't need him. He's a bottleneck." Their mocking voices echoed in my memory, firming my resolve. No, I wasn't going to destroy anything. I would never sink to that level of malice. I simply intended to remove myself from their equation and let them grapple with the reality. If they truly believed I was unnecessary, they were about to find out how the system functioned, without the so-called bottleneck they were so eager to be rid of. With everything set in motion, I powered down my computer. "See you all tomorrow," I whispered into the empty room, imagining the faces of my team. It wasn't gloating, not quite. More a solemn promise to myself. I picked up my bag and headed out, the lock on the office door clicking behind me in the dark. Tomorrow, they would have the freedom they craved. Tomorrow, the stage would be all theirs. Friday arrived crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to hit our team. I came in early, as usual, and watched from my office as the others trickled in with a nervous energy. This was the day of the big client demo for Project Alpha. Mark and Jasmine immediately huddled at their desks, preparing last-minute touches. Through the glass partition, I saw Leo in the conference room, setting up the demo environment on the projector. Everything appeared to be running smoothly, until it wasn't. Around 9:30 a.m., I heard Mark curse under his breath. He was hunched over his keyboard, frowning at his screen. "That's odd," I heard him mutter. I casually stepped out, coffee mug in hand, pretending to stretch my legs. Over his shoulder, I caught a glimpse of an error message on his laptop. Permission denied. Mark quickly closed the window, but I had already seen enough. My carefully laid traps were springing. A few minutes later, Jasmine emerged from the print room with a stack of handouts. She looked flustered. "I can't access the latest UI mock-ups on the shared drive," she whispered urgently to Leo, though from my vantage point nearby I caught every word. Leo's face tightened. Clearly, he'd encountered his own issues deploying the back-end updates earlier. Still, they soldiered on, exchanging anxious glances but saying nothing to me. Not yet. By 10 a.m., the conference room was filled with expectant faces. Our client's team had dialed in over video, and a couple of higher-ups from our company sat along the wall, including Anton. I took a seat off to the side as well, deliberately choosing a chair just slightly out of the main focus. This was Mark's show. I had made sure of that. He kicked off the presentation, voice wavering just a touch before he found a rhythm. For the first few minutes, things went well. Jasmine talked through the design slides confidently, and Leo chimed in with technical details. I watched them exchange furtive, relieved smiles. Perhaps they thought whatever hiccups they'd seen earlier were behind them. But then came the live demo portion, the real test. Mark attempted to load the latest build of our application on the big screen. The screen flickered and nothing. A blank loading page stared back at us. A few confused murmurs arose from the client's side of the call. I could see Mark's neck flush red from where I sat. One moment," he stammered, clicking again, then again. Still nothing. Jasmine hurriedly tried on her laptop and got the same result. Leo was already tapping furiously on his keyboard to diagnose, his face draining of color. I sipped my coffee slowly, heart pounding even as my exterior remained composed. I wasn't gleeful at this failure. It was too serious for glee. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim validation. They wanted to prove they could do it all without me. Now the emptiness on that screen was proving something else entirely. As the seconds stretched out, Anton cleared his throat. "Is there a problem?" he asked, brows furrowed. Mark swallowed hard. "It seems we're, having some unexpected technical difficulties," he managed to say. I could see his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the mouse. The clients on the call exchanged looks. One of them chimed in, not unkindly. "We can reschedule if needed." That only seemed to heighten the panic in the room. Jasmine jumped in, voice strained. "Actually, if you'll give us just a minute, we have a backup demo video of the feature." She shot a desperate look at Leo, who was already plugging in a flash drive. I knew that video, a pre-recorded demo they'd made as a contingency. Smart of them, ordinarily. Except that in their scramble that morning, they hadn't realized the video was outdated, showing an earlier design we'd since revised. They played it anyway, grasping at straws. For a moment it brought relief. The app interface appeared on screen and the clients nodded as if things were back on track. But then a client interrupted. "Excuse me, this looks different from what we saw last week in the draft report." The ensuing explanation from Jasmine and Mark tangled into a mess of apologies and stumbling words. Anton's frown deepened with each passing second. What should have been a triumphant showcase had devolved into a chaotic patch-up job. The final blow came when the video itself froze halfway through, apparently corrupted or improperly saved. It was hard to watch, yes, but it was the spectacle they had orchestrated for themselves. When the call mercifully ended, the clients agreed to a follow-up demo the next week. They sounded polite, but not pleased. The moment the connection dropped, the conference room fell into a heavy silence. Anton stood, jaw tight. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His disappointment was etched in the hard lines of his face as he looked at each of my team members in turn. "We will debrief in 10 minutes in the main office," he said curtly, then walked out without another word. Mark sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Jasmine was on the verge of tears. and Leo stared at the blank screen as if it might somehow give him answers. I set my empty coffee cup down on the table deliberately, breaking the silence. All three of them looked at me at once, eyes wide with a mixture of dread and pleading, as if expecting me to erupt in anger or pile onto their misery. But I did neither. I simply gave a small, tight smile. "Tough demo," I said quietly. "I'm sure we'll figure out what went wrong." My words were deliberately bland, almost gentle, but my gaze held each of them, for a beat longer than usual. In that look, I let them see that I knew. I knew that they knew I knew. Their faces told the story, flushed embarrassment, fear, and the bitter realization of what they had brought upon themselves. Without another word, I left the conference room. Behind me, I could almost feel the facade of their confidence finally crumbling to dust. We reconvened in the main office for the debrief, the air thick with tension. Anton stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, as my team filed in like chastened schoolchildren. I took a seat toward the side, out of the direct line of fire. Mark, Jasmine, and Leo remained standing until Anton curtly motioned for them to sit. He wasted no time. "What happened?" he demanded, voice low and controlled. Mark cleared his throat, staring down at his notepad. "Sir, Words failed him. No one wanted to meet Anton's eyes. Finally, Jasmine spoke up softly. "The deployment failed. We couldn't access the live environment." Her admission hung in the air. Anton's gaze flicked to me, briefly, then back to them. "And why wasn't this caught earlier? Why didn't anyone ensure everything was ready before the clients were on the call?" His tone was sharp. Leo shifted in his chair. "We did test the system earlier in the week. It was working in the staging environment," he offered, but trailed off as Anton's expression hardened. I let the silence do the work for a moment. Then I spoke in an even, calm tone. For context, I had given the team full ownership of this deliverable. They assured me everything was under control. I glanced at Mark and the others impassively. It appears there were oversights. Anton absorbed that, and I saw him draw the conclusions I wanted, that this failure was a result of their oversight, not something I had managed. He nodded slowly, disappointment evident. "Oversights," he repeated almost to himself. "This was a major client and we looked unprepared. This is not how we operate." He took a breath, then addressed my team again. "I expect each of you to send me a detailed report on what went wrong and how you will prevent this in the future, by Monday." His tone left no room for argument. He glanced at me. "Dave, you'll need to assist them in identifying the gaps." I inclined my head. "Of course. I'll help ensure the root causes are clear." My eyes flicked toward the trio as I said root causes, and I saw a fresh wave of discomfort ripple across their faces. They knew exactly what the root cause was, even if they couldn't say it. Anton dismissed the meeting with a curt, "That's all." As he left, the three of them remained seated, quiet and visibly shaken. I gathered my notes slowly, giving them a moment. The door had barely closed behind Anton when Mark blurted out in a hushed, broken voice, "Dave, I'm so sorry." Jasmine quickly nodded, eyes welling up. "We all are. We messed up." Leo put his face in his hands. It was as if the dam had broken. All their arrogance from days prior had drained away, leaving only regret and fear. I regarded them in silence for a moment. Their remorse seemed genuine, but I knew it was born of panic. They were afraid for their jobs, and perhaps finally realizing how unfair they had been. Part of me pitied them. They were talented but young, and they had just learned a brutal lesson. But part of me also remembered the sheer disdain I'd read in that chat, the laughs at my expense when they thought I wasn't looking. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I replied quietly. "You did mess up." I didn't add comfort or say that it was okay. It wasn't. "We'll talk more on Monday," I said, tucking my notebook under my arm. "Take the weekend to reflect and start on those reports." There was a measured firmness in my voice that made it clear this was not just about the technical failure. They each mumbled in agreement, voices subdued. As I turned to leave, Mark stood up, desperation in his eyes. "Dave," he started, his voice pleading, perhaps about to ask if there was any way to fix this or if I could forgive them somehow. I raised a hand gently to stop him. I wasn't interested in an after-the-fact justification or more apologies right now. "Use the time to think, Mark," I said, meeting his gaze. We'll address everything soon." He sat back down, deflated. I left the office and walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing. I could feel their eyes on my back, but none of them followed. In the hallway, I allowed myself a slow, deep breath. The collapse was complete. The team I thought I had, the team that had once toasted coffee with me in camaraderie, was in shambles. Trust was broken on all sides. Yet strangely, I felt calm. This outcome, harsh as it was, had a certain justice to it. They had wanted to operate without my involvement. They got exactly that, and the results spoke for themselves. Back at my desk, I unlocked a drawer and pulled out the printed chat log, pages of their taunts and scheming. I hardly needed to reread it. Every line was etched in my memory. Still scanning those pages steeled my resolve. Actions have consequences. I had handled things quietly until now, but it was time to be direct. I placed the papers back in the drawer and opened our chat application, the same platform where this all began. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to lay everything bare. I opened the private group chat, their hidden sanctuary of scorn, and for the first time my name appeared in the member list. With a few clicks I had granted myself visible access, the final act of my admin prerogative. A blank message box awaited me at the bottom of that long thread of messages I knew too well. My heart was steady as I began typing. I chose my words carefully, fingers gliding over the keys with deliberate calm. "Hello, team. You might be surprised to see me here, or perhaps after today you're not. I've spent the last few days catching up on all your candid conversations in this chat. Yes, all of it. I know what you really thought of me, and of our work together. I know about old Dave, the bottleneck, and every other nickname and complaint. Today's outcome wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of the mistrust and overconfidence displayed here. I gave you exactly the autonomy you claimed I was unworthy of, and I think we all saw the results. I won't pretend I'm not deeply disappointed, not in the project, but in the betrayal of my trust. I expected better from each of you. Going forward, things will change. Your access to critical systems will remain limited until trust is rebuilt, if ever. I have archived this entire conversation. Senior management and HR will receive a copy, so think carefully about your next steps. If any of you wish to speak to me directly, you know where my office is. Dave." I read the message through twice to ensure the tone was just right. Measured, factual, not a rant, but an unmistakable admonishment. Satisfied, I hit send. Almost instantly, I saw the small icons pop up one by one, indicating that Mark, Jasmine, and Leo were reading my words. For a few minutes, nothing happened. No one dared to reply. A typing indicator flickered on, then vanished. Finally, a single message appeared from Mark's account. "I'm so sorry, Dave. I have no excuse." Another followed from Jasmine, full of apologies and regret. Leo typed something longer, an earnest plea that they never meant to truly undermine me, that frustration and ego had gotten the better of them. I absorbed their apologies in silence. There was some part of me that appreciated their words, but it was far too late for just sorry. I didn't respond. I quietly left the chat, removing my access as easily as I had added it. My point had been made. In the aftermath, the consequences unfolded swiftly. By Monday, Anton and HR had those chat logs. Formal disciplinary meetings were scheduled. I heard that Mark chose to resign before those meetings took place, perhaps to avoid the inevitable. Jasmine and Leo were officially reprimanded. They narrowly kept their jobs, but were moved under a different supervisor and barred from sensitive projects for the foreseeable future. I wasn't interested in witnessing their punitive outcomes, beyond what was necessary. My involvement ended with delivering the truth to those who needed to see it. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office and found my desk unusually quiet. The team area had a few empty seats. I sat down, logged in, and glanced at the framed photo on my desk. A picture of our team from last year's office outing, all smiles and unity. It now felt like a relic from another life. I quietly placed it face down in a drawer. There was work to do, projects to stabilize, new staff to hire, trust to rebuild. Despite everything, I felt no rage, no gloating triumph, only a somber resolve and a sense of clarity. The illusions had collapsed, but in their place, something honest could begin. I rolled up my sleeves, took a deep breath, and started in on the day's tasks. This time I was truly on my own, and that was just fine.